So this video is going to be a summary of the big glitches that we've been looking into recently in Ocarina of Time. Glitches and Stuff has made a great video that explains how the Ace credits warp in Kokiri Forest works. I'll link that in the top right corner of the screen. Please watch that first before watching this video. It gives a great overview of all these concepts, and I'm just going to go into a little bit more technical detail about what's going on. I'm going to touch on SRM, stale reference manipulation, how that works. I'll cover function pointer manipulation and arbitrary code execution. So let's get started. So I'm going to start off with SRM first. SRM stands for stale reference manipulation, and I'll get into why it's called that in a minute. But I'm going to introduce to you this window here. This helps me see exactly what is inside of the N64's RAM, like the RAM you have in your computer. It's the same thing. This is the RAM for the game, and I've got on screen right now is the data for the Skulltula token that's on the wall. And we're going to be interested in particular with these three sets of data here. Those are X, Y, and Z positions. I can demonstrate that by changing some data here, and you'll see it move downward a little bit, like that. So I'm directly editing the Y coordinate of the Skulltula token. The reason why I'm showing you this is I want to talk a little bit about how the boomerang works. So when you threw the boomerang at something, it will move toward the actor that you threw it to, in this case the Skulltula token, and it will attach itself right there. And it will start to pull the actor back toward you. And the way that this illusion actually happens is that the boomerang is attaching itself and copying its positional data, X, Y, and Z shown here, from the boomerang to the token. So every frame, the position of the boomerang is copied to the token, and as it's coming back to you, it gives that illusion of attachment, when really it's just a straight copy one to the other, until it comes all the way back to you, and you collect it. So to switch this over to a paint diagram real quick, I'm going to draw a black box that's going to represent memory in the N64. Within this memory, where all of the actors on the screen go, I'm going to draw a box that's going to represent the boomerang, and another one in an orange color that's going to represent the Skulltula token. And what happens when you throw the boomerang at the Skulltula token and it attaches itself is it starts copying its XYZ data from the boomerang to the token. So it's a straight copy of data from one place to the other. Now, things get interesting with SRM when we have the ability to change rooms in such a way that the actor that the boomerang is attached to will unload, but the boomerang will still remain active and copy data. To demonstrate that here, I'll throw the boomerang at the token. As it attaches, go to the other room. And if the camera behaves in the way I want, I can go back into the room, and you'll see something else is attached to the boomerang. I've now grabbed a door. So I threw the boomerang at the Skulltula token, and it started copying its XYZ data to pull the token back. But I went in and out of the room and shifted memory a little bit, so now a door took its place, and the boomerang was copying its XYZ data to the door instead and pulled it closer to me. Going back to our paint diagram from earlier, every frame while our boomerang is attached to the Skulltula token, it's writing XYZ data over to the Skulltula token. But now we've made things interesting and left the room. At that point, the Skulltula token is completely unloaded off of the boomerang, and everything else that's in that room is unloaded. But we've done it in such a way that the boomerang can remain active, and when we re-enter the room, things in memory are going to shift a little bit. And now instead of a Skulltula token there's going to be a door taking its exact place in memory. So every frame, the boomerang is still writing its XYZ position data, but now there's a door there. So the door is what is grabbed by the boomerang and pulled closer to Link. So this line representing the connection between the boomerang and the actor that it grabbed is the reference. If you're a programmer, you might know it as a pointer. So this reference, when you leave the room and unload the actor that the boomerang grabs, becomes stale because the actor that it was supposed to be grabbing no longer exists. But through clever camera manipulation and some other things, you can keep that reference alive. You can keep that connection alive and keep writing that data even though it shouldn't be being written. This becomes especially powerful when you start offsetting how these different entities are loaded in memory, so that you can start writing data to different parts of actors, both their data and their code. So not only can you get SRM with the boomerang, arguably more useful is the held actor SRM. So you can see here there's a pot that I have up on screen, the pot in memory. As before, X, Y, Z are located right here. And you'll notice that once I pick it up, those values are going to start changing. And that is because now, in order to give the illusion that Link is holding the pot, there's a reference between Link and the pot, and XYZ data is being copied from Link to the pot. Now, what makes held actor even more powerful is that more data is written. For example, right down here is the angle. So now we have only 4 digits of data that are being written that are also easier to control, which is the angle, and that can be used for a bunch of things. The most common way you'll see this held actor SRM started is with a superslide, and that is because when you get a superslide, you're in like a pre-grab state, so you haven't actually grabbed the actor yet, but once you let go of shield, you will grab it. And with the superslide, you're also moving, so you can start a grab, get a superslide, slide to a new room, and then when you're in that new room, let go of shield to then pick up the actor that is now unloaded. So you get the superslide, slide into a new room, release shield, start the grab, and now there's nothing there to grab. But because we did it in a particular way, Link will still attempt to grab and hold nothing. And you'll see here, even though there's no actor currently loaded here in memory, there's still XYZ position data being written, and angle as well, both here and down here. So this is fundamentally how SRM works. You, either with the boomerang or with picking something up, make that link so that you're copying data, then go into a new room so that you unload that actor that you were supposed to be grabbing, but keep that link alive, that stale reference. And you can write data now anywhere that you can get that actor to load in memory, you can start writing data there. So stale reference manipulation on its own is actually really powerful. Having the ability to write data wherever you want can do lots of things. In this case, this is a clip of GNS. He gets stale reference manipulation and then uses the Z coordinate to modify the data in the chest actor that says what is inside. And in this case, he changed the bomb bag to be a prescription. So another really powerful use for SRM on its own is modifying the chest contents here in Deku Tree to contain Zelda's letter. This works fundamentally the same as the one in DC, except it uses the boomerang Z coordinate instead. But you're just modifying the chest data to change what is inside. And by putting Zelda's letter in the chest, you can then do GIM, a glitch we've already known about, to then use your analog angle to change what item you get, which is extremely powerful. If you've seen the pot chest glitch in Goron City, you know that this has a similar effect of giving you pretty much any item you want. But it's important to realize that Zelda's letter gem is a way of achieving this with just SRM alone. This involves a little bit more of an extra step, which I'll be going into in the next section. So up next, I'm going to cover something that GNS went over in his video, and this is function pointer manipulation. In his video, he used the analogy of the treasure map and the red X. I'm just going to go into a little bit more technical detail about what's happening there. So every actor has a specific variable, this first one here, that says where in memory the code is that is responsible for drawing the actor on the screen. To demonstrate that's the case, I'll pause the game real quick, and I will just simply make this a 0, so that the game doesn't know where that code is, and you'll see that the pot becomes invisible. It's still there and it still functions correctly, it's just not being drawn on the screen right now. So things get interesting when you set up SRM in such a way that the angle lines up with this draw pointer. As you can see on screen, the angle Link has, or more specifically the angle of the thing that he thinks he's holding, is overwriting this pointer. So 801E and then 2 numbers. And I'm effectively changing where the game is looking for the draw code. So I haven't shown this window yet, but this is the debugger, and this is just another way to view RAM. So I can enter in a memory address, and instead of showing values like this, it will show what those numbers mean when interpreted as code. So I'm going to enter a very specific memory address into here, 75B4, and you don't need to worry about what this means, but all you need to know is that starting right here is the function, the code that is ran when the rolling Goron gives you the bomb bag as child. This code exists in the file for the Goron, for all Gorons, so it's loaded in memory even though you're not Child Link. So this code exists in RAM right now, and we know exactly where it is in memory. So since we have the ability to change where the game is looking for this drawing code, we can simply do an angle setup, or in my case, I'll just hack in a new value, 75B4. And when we look at that variable, the game is now looking at 801E75B4 for this drawing code, which is exactly where the code is from the rolling Goron to give you the item. So unlike Arbitrary Code Execution, we're not actually creating any new code and executing that. We're running code that exists in the game already, in this case for giving the bomb bag from the rolling Goron, and making that code run from something else. And then when you do that, you can make a pot give you an item, for example. So one thing I really want to stress about function pointer manipulation is that pot chest is not the only thing that you can do with it. Function pointer manipulation as a whole is pretty unexplored. Pot chest is the only use for it in speedruns right now. But I have a couple examples I just want to show just to get it out there. So here in the forest, on top of the bridge over here, is the Kokiri girl that as adult is in the Lost Woods, and she will trade you the saw. While you can't trade for saw as child to her, the code that does that is still loaded in RAM right now. So we can use SRM to do function pointer manipulation. In this case, I'm just gonna hack it in, and I'm gonna edit the draw pointer for the soil patch right in front of me. So I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna change this to 1EAB74. This is the location in RAM for the function that gives you the saw when you trade with her as adult. Gonna resume and walk up to the soil patch and get the saw. So just a couple more examples. This is some stuff that Exodus found the other day. You can run Grotto code with the same pot that we use for pot chests. So if I do angle EE6C, drop the pot, and then run over to the pot chest one. It's now a pot grotto. If I pick it up and run off a ledge, you go to a grotto. And then you leave, and then you're in Goron City again. So you're running the code for the grotto that is up in that area over there. That code is in RAM, and you can run that from the pot using just SRM. And then another funny one, if you do F120, drop, run over to the pot, you can pick up a giant grotto. Yep. You can see it already, and then you can lift it up too. And walk around with it. So yeah, not exactly useful, but just to show you the direction that function pointer manipulation is headed in. No custom code being ran here, just running code that already exists from the game in RAM. So we're at the home stretch. This is the last thing I want to cover. This is Arbitrary Code Execution. This one is very complicated, so I'm not going to get into the very technical details about it. But Glitches and Stuff did a great job covering this in his video on the Ace Credits Warp in Kokiri Forest. But I'm just going to go over some of the main points to try and wrap it all up. So to illustrate my first point, I'm going to bring up the memory window again. You're looking at data related to Link's instance. But all that's important is that all you're seeing right now is numbers in memory. I'm going to go somewhere else in RAM. This is going to be code. This is code that is in memory. And again, you just see numbers in memory. That's all it is. I can pull up this debugger window from earlier. You can see what these numbers look like when interpreted as code. But the main thing to understand is that code when in memory is just numbers, and data when in memory is just numbers. They're both just numbers in memory. So we know that data is just numbers in RAM, and we know that code is just numbers in RAM. We have a good amount of control over some data in this game. So if we pick the right numbers, we can make some data look like code. And that is exactly what we do with arbitrary code execution. Given this first example, which you all probably know from any %ace by now, if you look at the first two sets of data here, once I press the end button right here, you'll see a bunch of numbers. And those numbers are picked very specifically, because if I open up the debugger and go to that address, you'll see that our file name is now 2 instructions. So we've created code with our file name. So some more data that we can easily manipulate, if you look at this first group of data here, is the X and Y rotation of a slingshot seed, or the vertical and horizontal aim while you have a slingshot seed pulled back. And you can very easily form some code with this, which is what any % does. And along with that, we have controller inputs. So this is input from controller 1. See different values when I press different buttons, and the control stick as well. This game also reads input from the controller plugged into port 3. So you can create code by holding buttons and control stick angles on both controllers. So by manipulating different data in the game, you can write your own code, and you can use stale reference manipulation to then execute that code. With the arbitrary code execution used in any %, for example, we only have a few instructions that we can write, but it is possible to have total control in this game. Something important to mention about ACE is that it is completely possible to chain together a couple uses of ACE to remove the limit on the file name, which will then allow you to type in any code that you want and basically rewrite the game from top to bottom. Best example I can give is that an all dungeon speedrun with ACE would use this technique to rewrite the game so that each dungeon boss is beaten and that the blue warps chain together with each other, so that the speedrun would basically be you do ACE in Kokiri Forest to remove the file name limit, and then type your whole speedrun in, and then hit the play button so that all of the dungeons are chained together and happen on their own. So this is what ACE is capable of. Here's the payload that Cheese typed. He just kind of fucked with the game, but this just demonstrates that with ACE anything is possible. I'll skip around a little bit. Yep, he's levitating and stuff. Zelda's got a couple heads. Yeah, things are going crazy. So yeah, total control ACE is another level of broken. So to close out this video, I'm going to do one last MSPaint masterpiece. And I'm just going to draw out exactly what's happening with function pointer manipulation and arbitrary code execution, and point out some of the similarities and differences. So just like my previous diagram, the black box is going to represent memory, and for function pointer manipulation, I'm going to draw a box. This can represent any actor, let's say a pot from pot chest. Somewhere else in memory is going to be its overlay file, which will contain its draw function. And normally, the pot will have a pointer or a reference to where this function is in memory. Then nearby in memory, we have code for something else. In the case of pot chest, this would be code for Gorons, which would contain the function for giving the bomb back. Then by using just stale reference manipulation, we can modify this pointer, which says where the drawing code is, and change it to then say that the code is over here, and execute the code for something else. In pot chest case, execute the code for giving the bomb back. So for arbitrary code execution, it would be the same deal. We'd have a pot in memory. We would have the code for that pot in memory as well. And the pot would be looking at this place in memory for its drawing code. The difference is with arbitrary code execution is that we're writing our own code. So we can allocate a slingshot seed here, say, and then set its X and Y rotation to something very specific. And then say all the way over here in this region of memory that stores just data, we can then have controller 1 be some value, and then controller 3 be some value, and then file name be some other value that, when interpreted as code, will actually run specific instructions. Then when you use SRM to change the location of this draw function for the pot, to then look at the data with the slingshot seed that we created, now you're executing code that you wrote yourself in the game with data. And with this data, you write jumps so that execution will go from the slingshot seed over to the controller, over to controller 3, and then down to file name to execute code that you wrote yourself with data. So function pointer manipulation lets you run game code. Arbitrary code execution lets you run your own code. It should be noted that arbitrary code execution has issues on VC for a couple reasons. First off, VC will recompile functions one function at a time and then cache it. And all this means is that if you use SRM to make changes to code, it won't take effect until the next time it has to be recompiled. This one is pretty easy to get around. You could just make your changes and then wait a while so that your code is recompiled again. The issue is more with running data as code. So down here we're running seed angle as code and file name and controller inputs. The VC recompiler is looking for a valid function, so you can't just create your own code with data and run it. But VC has no issues with function pointer manipulation, so in this case, like for pot chests, it works just fine because you're running valid code. It's valid game code that's already there. So yeah, both of these glitches are very powerful. Arbitrary code execution, it should be noted that we have total control with this, which means that we are able to completely rewrite the game's code from top to bottom to make the game do whatever we want. Function pointer manipulation is not quite capable of that, but it can also do some very powerful things, and like I said earlier, it's very unexplored, so we'll have to see where that goes. I hope this video was helpful in understanding these topics. I tried to keep it as condensed as possible, but obviously that was pretty hard. If anybody has any questions, please ask in Discord. There will be people who would love to answer any questions that you have. So yeah, thank you.